Imagine an airplane flying smoothly above the clouds, carrying hundreds of passengers across continents. Now imagine that same plane suddenly grounded, not because of a technical failure, but because the engine it relies on might no longer be available. This isn't science fiction. Earlier this year, reports emerged that the US could suspend engine supplies for China's C919, a jet that has already safely flown over 1 million passengers since entering service. The C919 is more than just an airplane. China's bold step into the global commercial aviation arena to compete with Boeing and Airbus. But without engines, this ambitious program could face a production halt in as little as 3 years. This raises urgent questions about US leverage and whether Russia can step in to fill the gap, or if it's just talk. At the heart of it all is a simple truth: the engine is the heart of an aircraft. Without it, the wings, fuselage, and cockpit are useless. A large plant in France spanning over 100 hectares. This facility produces over 1,600 aircraft engines each year, powering hundreds of aircraft worldwide. The engines for the C919 come from CFM International, a joint venture owned 50% by France's Safran and 50% by the US's GE Aerospace. That 50-50th split gives the US the authority to halt engine exports if it chooses, no matter how advanced China's program has become. COMAC ordered 760 LEAP-1C engines for roughly 380 C919s, but only 18 planes have been delivered, leaving around 360 engines still pending. A single decision in Washington or Paris can ripple across continents, affecting production schedules, airlines, and the passengers who rely on these planes. To understand the aircraft itself, let's look at the C919. Imagine an airplane flying smoothly above the clouds carrying hundreds of passengers across continents. Now imagine that same plane suddenly grounded, not because of a technical failure, but because the engine it relies on might no longer be available. This isn't science fiction. Earlier this year, reports emerged that the US could suspend engine supplies for China's C919, a jet that has already safely flown over 1 million passengers since entering service. The C919 is more than just an airplane. It's China's bold step into the global commercial aviation arena, designed to compete with giants like the Airbus A320 and Boeing 737. But without engines, this ambitious program could face a production halt in as little as 3 years. This raises urgent questions about supply, politics, and passengers. Today we're going to unpack this high-stakes story, exploring supply chains, geopolitics, and the race for aviation independence. To understand why a single component could shape the future of global air travel, we need to look at the heart of engine production and global supply chains: avionics, landing gear, flight control systems. The engines for the C919 come from CFM International, a joint venture owned 50% by France's Safran and 50% by the US's GE Aerospace. So far, China's COMAC has ordered 760 LEAP-1C engines to equip roughly 380 C919 planes. But only 18 planes have been delivered, leaving around 360 engines still pending. A single decision in Washington or Paris can ripple across continents, affecting production schedules, airlines, and even the passengers who rely on these planes. The CFM LEAP-1C is the engine currently used on the C919, a critical component that ties global suppliers to China's program. That 50-50 ownership is crucial. It gives US authorities leverage to halt exports if they choose. Earlier this year, the US Department of Commerce began suspending export licenses for American companies supplying components to China. COMAC has ordered 760 LEAP-1C engines to equip roughly 380 C919 planes, a massive backlog that hinges on steady engine supply. Delivery schedules are delayed, production lines slow, and some analysts warned the program could cease production within 3 years if supplies are fully cut. Why would the US take such a risky step against one of the world's largest aviation customers? The answer leads us to a less obvious but strategic resource: rare earths. The power of the US over the C919 program became very clear earlier this year, when the Department of Commerce began suspending export licenses for American companies supplying components to China. This wasn't just about engines. It affected a wide range of critical aircraft parts: avionics systems, hydraulic controls, auxiliary power units, landing gear systems, and navigation equipment. The real-world consequences of such restrictions are immediate and tangible. Imagine a factory ready to deliver hundreds of planes suddenly unable to get the parts it needs. Semiconductor chips, telecommunications equipment, and now the shadow of these controls looms large over the C919 program. The engines for the C919 come from CFM International, a joint venture owned 50% by France's Safran and 50% by the US's GE Aerospace. Reviewed, revised, revoked. Delivery schedules are delayed, production lines slow down, and the ambitious goal of competing with Boeing and Airbus suddenly faces a hard stop. Some American media even predicted that if engine supplies were fully cut, the C919 program could cease production within 3 years. Suppliers like Honeywell, Collins, and Parker would be affected, risking lost revenue, broken contracts, and strained relationships with China. Compliance briefings highlighted vulnerabilities, showing how dependent modern aircraft systems are on external suppliers and approvals. Empty parts shelves and halted shipments left factories and airlines scrambling for critical components. In short, the C919 isn't just about China building a jet, it's about navigating a global network of high-tech suppliers, each with its own rules, politics, and stakes. While the world debated US restrictions and Russia's potential support, China quietly accelerated its own solution, the CJ100A engine, a fully domestic alternative to the LEAP-1C. The story of the C919, the US export restrictions, Russia's offer, and China's domestic CJ1000A engine is more than an aviation tale. It's a high-stakes game of technology, geopolitics, and strategy. The answer lies not in airplanes, but in a hidden resource critical to modern technology: rare earth elements. These are a group of 17 metals, neodymium, dysprosium, yttrium, that might sound obscure, but they're indispensable in modern technology. From smartphones and electric vehicles to wind turbines and even fighter jet engines, from the magnets in your smartphone and the motors in an electric vehicle, to the guidance systems in a missile and the generators in a wind turbine. When it comes to aviation, this matters because modern jet engines rely on magnets and materials derived from rare earths. Prices have spiked dramatically. Samarium used in fighter jet engines skyrocketed nearly 60 times in a few months. Without rare earths, much of today's high-tech world simply doesn't function. China dominates this market. It controls over the vast majority of global rare earth refining capacity, especially for heavy rare earths used in advanced technologies. Earlier this year, the U.S. Department of Commerce began suspending export licenses for American companies supplying components to China. This wasn't just about engines. The restrictions ripple across aerospace, defense electronics, consumer tech, and clean energy. Imagine a factory ready to deliver hundreds of planes suddenly unable to get the parts it needs. If the US holds back engines, will Russia step in to fill the gap? Russia publicly offered to provide China with aircraft engines including the PD-14 as a potential alternative for the C919. Rostec isn't a minor player. Russia has serious industrial capacity to produce turbofan engines. Can Russia deliver engines in the quantities China needs? Can they meet strict international safety standards? And how quickly could integration happen without disrupting production? In terms of overall technological strength, Russia is considered second only to the United States. Its offer is serious, not merely symbolic. As tensions over engine supplies mounted, Russia stepped into the spotlight through Rostec, one of its largest state-owned industrial groups. Historic Russian design bureaus like Klimov and Kuznetsov built decades of engine expertise, proven on test stands and military airframes. The PD-14 is a modern turbofan already powering Russia's MC-21 jets, and if integrated into the C919, it could replace the LEAP-1C. But big questions remain. Can Russia deliver at the scale China needs, meet strict international safety standards, and integrate quickly? Scaling production for commercial aviation is another hurdle. Mass-producing engines requires precise coordination across supply chains and quality control. While the world debated US restrictions and Russia's potential support, China quietly accelerated its own solution, the CJ100A engine. The CJ100A is designed with about 13 tons of thrust, composite fan blades, and a digital control system to match Western efficiency. Progress has been rapid. The CJ100A has completed core endurance testing and is now on flight trials, aiming for certification by 2026 and mass production by 2027. A new engine needs thousands of hours of stable operation, a full maintenance and spare parts network, and pilot procedures before commercial rollout. If successful, China would gain an independent world-class engine, greatly reducing vulnerability to foreign restrictions. The story of the C-919 U.S. export restrictions, Russia's offer, and China's CJ-1000A is more than aviation. It's a high-stakes chess game of technology and geopolitics. One country's decision to restrict engines created ripples across continents, while Russia's potential involvement offered a lifeline as China moved to secure its own future. By restricting exports, the U.S. risks lost revenue and driving suppliers and China toward domestic alternatives, escalating the geopolitical stakes. Critical materials and global supply chains concentrate power. This contest over engines and rare earths is shifting the strategic center of gravity eastward. The decisions made by the United States, Russia, and China will determine whether the C-919 and CJ-1000A reshape the global aviation landscape. If you found this deep dive intriguing, subscribe and turn on notifications. We'll keep bringing updates on aviation breakthroughs and geopolitics. Don't miss it.